All right, today we'll do our bell work. We want to go over our You Are Not So Smart handout worksheet, and then we'll take notes on classical conditioning today, and then give you some time to work on some classical conditioning examples at the end of class, okay? So the first one with our bell work, which one does not belong? Food, puff of air, light, or bell? Which one does not belong? Griffin? Bell doesn't belong. Why doesn't bell belong? That is a conditioned stimulus. All the others are unconditioned stimuli, right? So remember, unconditioned stimulus is unlearned. Out of the womb, you respond to it. So you'll salivate the food, you'll blink with a puff of air, and your eyes will dilate with light in them, right? Salivation, dilation, leaving class, and blinking. Which one doesn't belong there? Miss Wiggin? Salivation is a good guess. You want to guess again? You're up to a 33% chance of getting it right. Leaving class is correct. You figured out why it's leaving class? It's a conditioned response. Very good. It is a conditioned response, and the others would be unconditioned responses. If you're using abbreviations, it would be a CR. The others would be UR. Salivation is a UR. Salivation, we're making the assumption here that's salivation to food, dilation to light, and then blinking to puff of air. Okay, Pavlov, Watson, Skinner, Maslow. This is kind of a larger perspective type of question here. Miss Sarah, which one doesn't belong?
Maslow.
And why doesn't Maslow belong?
He goes with humanistic, and the other ones are behaviorism.
Yep, the others are associated with behaviorism. Remember our study on learning, we're going to dive deep into the behaviorist approach first for the first few lessons, and then we'll start getting away from that, and we may turn a little bit to cognitive psychology for the second half of our study on learning, or really like the last quarter of it, because the majority is the behaviorist approach. Sound good? All right. Your assignment. You are not so smart. Let's get that out in front of you, and look at those questions. It's about extinction burst. So extinction is one of the four phenomena associated with conditioning that you're going to look at, or we're going to look at today. It means, what does extinction mean? Actually, you tell me. You read the handout. What is extinction? Ruben, what's extinction? Okay, so like when you think about dinosaurs, you think about extinction in that particular aspect. When you think about conditioning, how does extinction apply there? Yes, Mr. Paul.
Well, in this context, it's like you're stopping something you would usually do, so you're stopping a habit.
Okay, so there's a disassociation, right?
Yeah.
For classical conditioning, it's all about pairing up two stimuli over and over and over again, and then once extinction takes place, you can differentiate the conditioned stimulus from the unconditioned stimulus. Everybody got that? Okay. It does introduce you to the concept of operant conditioning as well. We'll look at this a little bit more in depth next week, but extinction still applies there, and that's where we really get into these extinction bursts where you have fits of rage, right? With extinction and classical conditioning, you just kind of go off on the wayside. It just doesn't work anymore. It doesn't happen. You don't respond like you did previously, okay, when you were conditioned. With operant condition, when extinction takes place, you get upset, right? You get frustrated, and that's where these bursts come from, okay? All right, examples of classical conditioning that they have there in the article. We got a couple of them. Landy, you got one?
Yeah. Like when you eat something and then you get sick afterwards.
All right, so the food, the bad food, right? That is the unconditioned stimulus. It's natural for you to get sick associated with that. So you getting sick would be the unconditioned response and the conditioned response there. What is the conditioned stimulus sometimes whenever it comes to getting sick with a particular food? It could actually be a lot of things. Ms. Walder? Well, could be. We don't really think about an actual cause, though, right? So a condition is learned. It's associated with the actual cause sometimes. Griff?
Like smell.
It could be a smell associated with it. So we didn't have to actually eat the food, right? but we will start to feel nauseous, right, and get sick as a result of just smelling it. Everybody got that? So somebody cooked up something in the microwave the other day. Oh,
it's
Mr. Prina. He had clam chowder. Give him a hard time because he's going to give me a hard time for, or Mr. Glick and I unless Mr. Glick turns it on here. We're going to fail this test here in a second. But he had some clam chowder, put it in the microwave, nuked it. All right, makes it real good smell. All right, so the smell in and of itself brings back this, for me, I had a bad experience with fish when I was growing up, all right, and so I don't eat fish anymore today, right, so anything associated with it, the smell becomes a conditioned stimulus, makes me feel sick. Sound good? All right. Another example from the reading, that could be an example of classical conditioning.
Showering and flushing.
Yep, there you go. All right, flushing toilet, jumping back, hot water in the shower. Sound good? So what is the actual unconditioned stimulus here in this particular case that would make you jump back? Good try. It's the hot water, because the flushing the toilet, what does that do? It increases the temperature of the water, right? And the hot water is what you make jump back. What makes you jump back? So the unconditioned stimulus again is the hot water here, okay? The sound of the flushing toilet becomes a what? Conditioned stimulus. Everybody got that? The conditioned stimulus, the flushing toilet, it doesn't always make the water hot, but sometimes it does. But we naturally associate it, pair it up over and over again, we naturally assume that it's going to get hot, so we just jump back when we hear the toilet flush thing, okay? So that's a good example of classical conditioning. Now, again, the conditioned response and the unconditioned response, it's the same thing, it would be jumping back here. Everybody got that? So we got 4 components, the unconditioned stimulus, hot water. Conditioned stimulus is the flushing toilet, or the sound of the flushing toilet, because you could have somebody put it on their phone outside the shower, right? And then have the sound flush, and then you jump back, because you just hear it, right? And respond that way, okay? Are there any other examples of classical conditioning? I think there may have only been 2 in there. All right, what about operant conditioning? Operant conditioning. So this is where we have aspects of reinforcement. Some type of reward is given, or some type of unwanted stimulus is taken away, which is actually a reward. And so eventually that is removed to create the extinction burst. So operant conditioning, example, Ms. Donner?
Turning on the air conditioning made you stop sweating.
Exactly. So the unwanted feeling of being hot and sweaty, right, that is removed. That is a good thing, right? That's operant conditioning. Sound good? So it's actually an example of negative reinforcement, okay? We'll throw that terminology out here right now. Negative reinforcement, a lot of students, they get this question wrong. We talk about it multiple times in class, and they'll get to the question, they'll still miss it. The reason why, it's termed negative reinforcement, and people think, oh, it's got negative in the terminology, it must be a bad thing. It's not. It's a good thing. Negative reinforcement is a really good thing. You want negative reinforcement. It's like a reward. Everybody understand that? Okay, because it's the removal of an aversive stimulus. Aversive means unwanted stimulus. Okay, it's a good thing. What does Coach say at the end of practice? If you pay attention, we won't do what? We won't have any sprints. We don't have any sprints. Don't you want that reward, right? It's the removal of a aversive stimulus. That's negative reinforcement, okay? I always make the statement saying that we should make t-shirts, confuse everybody, give me negative reinforcement, walk around with it. Everybody would be dumbfounded. They don't understand. All right, another example of operant conditioning. Connor?
If you go to work, you get paid.
If you go to work, you get paid. Exactly. All right. So the payment there would be the positive reinforcement, making you want to go to work. Okay. All right. So extinction burst, I think, is the last question, and a good example of extinction burst. So when you don't get the reinforcement, right? A lot of times we get frustrated. Logan, you got an example?
So your computer freezing up, so you start clicking on and then bang first.
Bam, 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 bam. Right? Mr. Glick caught me the other day. He's like, man, you're hitting that key pretty hard.
You were aggressive with finishing that email.
Exactly. I was getting frustrated. There was a lack of reinforcement going on in that particular case. Extinction burst. Yes.
Would a drug user's relapse be?
Yes, that would be an extinction burst. Yep. Same idea with like a dieter, giving in, right? So I hang out in the teacher's lounge with my extra time with Coach Glick, Mr. Glick coaching. So I get to see all the teachers coming in and grabbing all the extra donuts that are left over throughout the rest of the day on Fridays. And all their diets experience extinction burst. Right? Logan, you got one more example?
Kid not getting candy throwing a fit.
What's that?
Kid not getting candy
Yeah,
throwing a fit.
yeah, that's a real extinction burst, right? So, yeah, I've seen that one quite often. In the adult variation of that would be, the guy get fired, right? He doesn't get paid, and so what does he do to the boss's desk? That's really throwing a tantrum right there. Or vulgar language is really like a child's tantrum, just in an adult form. Or, high school guys, what do? They punch walls, right? That's a tantrum. That's their variation and version of throwing a tantrum. That's an extinction burst. They didn't get the reinforcement that they wanted to, right? No reinforcement, here comes the rage. Right? Some of us are able to control it more so than others. All right. Good stuff there. Good introduction to classical and opera conditioning. Let's go ahead and take out a sheet of notebook paper and take some notes. Break this down a little bit more specifically here. All right, our objectives. Kind of already hit on a lot of this stuff, so maybe we can go through it a little bit faster today. Identify the kind of learning that Ivan Pavlov discovered, so you had your TED Ed on Pavlov the other day. Describe the sequence of events of classical conditioning. That means we're going to be breaking it down into those four components, the US, UR, CS, CR. Analyze how changes in stimuli, learning conditions lead to changes in conditioned responses. So that's where we're going to start talking about our phenomenon associated with it, and extinction's a part of that. We get three others to learn about here in a moment. And then create a demonstration which appears to be classically conditioned. So not exactly sure how we're going to do that. Maybe I'll come up with an idea. You guys seen this before? Yeah. All right, I'll show this real quick. Oh, bummer. I can always pull it up real fast, though. Oh. I think they've eliminated it altogether. Bummer. Oh, I got it.
What? One Alpha. Okay. Alpha, shoot. What are you doing? What? I don't know. My mouth tastes so bad all of a sudden.
Alright, so that's classical conditioning. Right there, it usually gives you a little bit more information if you watch the entire episode. But what is the unconditioned stimulus here in that particular segment? Because he's really recreating Pavlov's dog experiment there. What is the unconditioned stimulus, Ms. Walner?
Like the bell beans.
Good try. Good try. You want to guess again? So the bell is paired up with what?
Oh, mint.
The mint. Yep. The mint is the unconditioned stimulus. Remember, unconditioned is unlearned. It's naturally going to create a response. You come out of the womb. Do you start to salivate to a bell? Nope. All right. So you salivate naturally to the mint. So that's the unconditioned stimulus. Then the bell would become the conditioned stimulus there, or the shutting down of the computer, and then the salivation there. So he gets Dwight to salivate to the shutting down of one's computer. All right. One complex prank there. Okay. Good stuff. So we've already talked about this. Learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior acquired through experience, and we're saying that it's a relatively permanent change because extinction can't take place. That learned conditioned behavior can eventually go away. Okay. Let's do a little bit of some examples here. What do you think of when I say Hitler? Nazi, right? What else? Holocaust. What else? Adolf. Okay, his first name. Gas chambers. Anything else? World War II. What? Torture. Anything else? Germany. Good. Military. I've gotten mustaches in the past. I thought was a good one. Or hate, right? Just hate as a whole. What about the flag? Freedom. What else? America. I use America anymore. Yeah. No A. What's that? Anything else with the flag? Greatness. Right? What's that? Trucks. Eagles. Okay, good stuff. Okay, so why does this happen? Happens because we've paired those things up over and over and over again. We've made associations between those two stimuli, and that's essentially what classical conditioning is. Right? It's learning through which an organism makes a connection, an association between different stimuli. Your unconditioned stimulus, your conditioned stimulus. Okay, so for us to really get a good baseline and foundation of what classical conditioning is, you have to break it down to exactly how do we define a stimulus. A stimulus is defined as any event or object inside of one's environment to which we respond, or to which an organism responds. Because conditioning can be applied not just to humans, but it can be applied to animals as well. And you see it a lot. A lot of conditioning being associated with like training pets and dogs or other type of animals that way. Okay, so a lot of applications to classical conditioning. Whenever you start to acquire a good understanding of how classical conditioning works, then the ultimate task is for you to go out and condition somebody else's behavior around you. Okay, I had a student. It was a long time ago, but walked into class the first day, and he asked, "When are we going to learn about mind control?" Right? That's all he wanted to do. Sign up for psychology so he could talk about mind control, learn how to control other people's minds. And I was like, we're not going to do that, but the next closest thing is probably classical conditioning, right? Manipulating other people's behavior by using aspects of psychology there, okay? Sometimes classical conditioning is known as respondent conditioning because the aspects of response is there, or Pavlovian because of Ivan Pavlov, this guy, coming across it. Now, was Pavlov a psychologist to begin with? From that video you watched the other day? Was he a psychologist? It was about Pavlov, right? Yeah? Was he a psychologist? Ms. Munson, was he a psychologist? Yes or no? We got 50% chance of getting it right? No, you are correct. He was not. Emma, take a guess what he is? What he was? He is. That'd be a really old guy. What is that, Miss Stoner? Neurologist, good try. Dog trainer. He did do a lot of work with dogs. He was studying digestion, so he was studying really anatomy and physiology. He's a physiologist, right? And he wasn't from the United States. Sometimes students make that assumption if we're talking about him that he's from the United States. And somebody discovered something. Got to be an American, but he's Russian, right? St. Petersburg, Russia. Focused on the physiology of digestion, so you can understand why he was doing what he was doing with those dogs, right? With the studying the aspect of salivation, because salivation is a key component when it comes to the digestive process there. I'm going to go past this fast. These are located on the website if you want to go back, and you have to be that person that writes everything down. Okay? Because that's what it is. The dopamine that your body produces when you get to the end of the notes, the slides, you got it done. You're like, get this rush of dopamine, and that's the positive reinforcement that makes you want to do it again. You're addicted to writing down all of the notes. He developed classical conditioning by accident. Accidentally came across it. If you go back to what he was doing, he had these slits in the sides of the dog's mouths, and then he puts the test tubes there. He's really measuring the amount of salivation that they were producing while they were consuming the dog powder, all right, or the dog food powder. But what he found, which was what he was astonished with, was the test tubes would start to fill up before they would even be given the food itself, right? So he's like, how could that happen? How can they start to salivate and they haven't even got any food in their mouths, right? And so that was the beginning of this study of what are the conditioned stimuli that the dogs are anticipating, that they have connected with the food that makes them anticipate the food in and of itself, okay? Again, for us to understand classical conditioning, not only do we have to understand stimuli, but we have to understand its foundational reflexes. Again, these are natural, unconditioned. They're unlearned. We come out of the womb with some natural reflexes, okay? For example, like jumping back to a snake, right? Or just, staying away from snakes altogether, right? It's interesting. That's kind of a universal characteristic. No matter where you are, most people in most cultures, when they're exposed to snakes, they don't go near them, all right? They don't necessarily learn. It's unlearned, all right? It's unconditioned. There are two kinds of reflexes, really responses. You have conditioned reflexes and unconditioned reflexes. This is more operant conditioning here. Does everybody see this? So this applies to the other half of that handout, You Are Not So Smart. The dog is ringing the bell, and that's, looks pretty cool, right? That's pretty impressive. But it's not really pairing up to stimuli. He's getting reinforced with positive reinforcement. He's getting a treat here. So that's really not classical conditioning. That would be operant conditioning. Okay. Salivation to food is considered to be an unconditioned response, right? So we've talked about that before. Any stimulus like food that creates an unconditioned response is called an unconditioned stimulus. I always like looking at the reactions of little kids when they first get exposed to this stuff. We deterred Preston from drinking any carbonated beverages for a long time. We had a really good run. I think he was almost 5, maybe 4 or 5, before we went to this public library thing, right? And they were going to have root beer floats, ice cream social. And we thought, well, maybe he'll just get ice cream and not get the root beer. But he ended up getting the root beer, and root beer by itself, actually. And so he took it, and so he likes to order it now, but it's so sweet to him that he'll only drink like tiny bits of it because he's not used to it. And so it's too sweet that way. I used to think that, I get strange looks when I tell people that we've kind of deprived Preston of carbonated beverages. I used to think the same way when I heard about parents not letting their kids, drink carbonated beverages. But you should see how much energy he's got in the first place, so there's no need for extra sugar. All right, Pavlov, he demonstrated that dogs could be conditioned to salivate, and you guys watched the TED Ed on that, so you should have a good understanding how he did it. He would play musical notes, like the bell, just after presenting the food to the dogs, do that 20 times over, and then the dogs would just salivate to the bell, okay? The musical note would become a conditioned stimulus, and then salivation just to the conditioned stimulus by itself, the note, that would be conditioned response. So let's get to the new stuff, okay? Higher order conditioning. So this is the newer content away from our TED Ed. Higher order conditioning is where you have multiple conditioned stimuli working together, building up towards one response. Everybody got that? Building up towards one particular response. So we use the example of giving blood. And like you guys have an opportunity to give blood here in a week or so, right? I always encourage you guys to take advantage of that. But there are a number of stimuli that actually start to make your muscles tense up before the needle actually, punctures your skin. Okay? What are some things that you are exposed to that start to make your muscles get tense? What is it? Okay, so immediately before it enters, you see it, right? And so that would definitely make you to start to tense up. But I'm telling you, there's things that are happening 15, 20 minutes before that are considered conditioned stimuli that would lead to you, flexing your muscles. Yes.
When they like wipe your arm down.
Okay, so we're getting farther and farther ahead. So that's like 30 seconds in front. So that would be a conditioned stimulus. What else?
Nervousness?
Well, that's kind of a response, right? Nervousness could be characterized by tense muscles, right? What else?
When you walk into the doctor.
Okay, you walk in. That could be the case if you have to give blood the same location over and over again, right? And so just seeing the building in and of itself, the building could be a conditioned stimulus. Let's use our scenario here with the gym, right? Because all of our blood giving opportunities are in the gym, okay? When you come to school that day, all right, you walk past the gym, you get a number of conditioned stimuli, right? You see them wearing their scrubs, right? The sight of seeing nurses in the scrubs could be a conditioned stimulus that would prepare you for muscle tension, preparing you for that one moment where the needle punctures your skin, okay? The smell is different in the gym that day, right? So that's a conditioned stimulus. You know the process, have you guys ever given blood here at the high school? They put those blue curtain places up and you got to go through and you got to fill out all the information. That could be considered a conditioned stimuli. Sound good? Leading up to that one response, okay? So that's higher order conditioning where you have multiple conditioned stimuli working together towards one response, okay? All right, phenomenon. In the dog example, what would happen if you continue to play the musical note, but you remove the food? What would take place? Eventually it would go away, right? It'd be like dinosaurs to become extinct. Sound good? So that's what they term extinction there. So that may happen, right? If Jim continued to shut down his computer but never gave Dwight another mint, right? Extinction would probably take place, right? Because every once in a while he's going to have to, pair those stimuli up again, okay? Dwight's going to figure out that he's not going to get a mint, okay? So extinction would take place there. This is the second phenomenon. So these are phenomenon. Phenomenon number 1 is extinction. Phenomenon number 2 is spontaneous recovery, like this guy here. After the response was extinct, Pavlov would wait 20 minutes, and then he'd try again with the musical note. Sometimes, after extinction took place, salivation would come back, and he called this spontaneous recovery. Sound good? Sometimes it would reappear if he just tried again. It's like the dogs would have like a hiccup. Their brain would have a hiccup, and they forgot that extinction took place, and all of a sudden they start salivating again, right? And we do this sometimes too, right? We do this in a lot of different ways. My favorite example is the on-again, off-again relationships, that you go through in high school, right? When I look at it in terms of classical conditioning, it's really just spontaneous recovery, right? You're tired of the relationship, so you go your separate way, and then all of a sudden you get exposed to a stimulus associated with that significant other, and then all those feelings start rushing back, and you have a cognitive hiccup, and spontaneous recovery takes place, and you get back together, right? So it's kind of like an interesting example there. What would happen if you changed the musical note, right? Say that we were doing the Pavlov dog experiment and we always used middle C and food powder. Paired that up over and over, right? Middle C, food powder. What if I did that and then, so the dog's conditioned to middle C, what if I put like F sharp? Would the dog salivate to F sharp just like middle C? Yeah, it would, all right? So yes is the answer. Sound good? And that's what we call generalization. If the stimulus is similar in characteristic or nature to the original stimulus, then yes, a response will take place, okay? So F sharp will work, right, in this particular case. It has to be a similar. So later on, Skinner does this with operant conditioning. He does it with lighted discs, right? and he would have pigeons peck like an orange disc, and then they'd be reinforced. And then if he lit up like a similarly colored disc, like it would be yellow or like a yellowish orange, they would go ahead and use that one as well. Right? So it works with operant conditioning in the same manner. I'll give you one other example of this. A couple years ago, I was painting my house, and I got up to the top of my house where the roof went like this, and I was getting up underneath some of the soffits there, and I had to put this big ladder up against the wall. Okay? So when I got all the way up there, I was reaching back into the corners. You know what lives up underneath those corners sometimes? Wasps. They have to build big nests. And I saw that one was inside the soffit, and it had like a hole like this where the wasps were coming in and out. I said, I'm going to get the best of those wasps. I took all my caulk, my painter's caulk, and I went up there on top of the ladder. And I'm like, I'm going to get the best of it. You're going to go in, you're going to stay in, right? You're not coming out again, right? So I go up there and try to caulk in the hole, and of course what happens? They start flying out, right? And I'm on this ladder that's, 12, 15 feet off the ground. I'm in a predicament, right? So I get stung. And it's a tough situation, traumatic, right? So I get down, kind of recover, run away from it for a while, and then it's not like I call it the day. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. Still got a lot to do. So I eventually get back to work, but for the remainder of the day, it didn't matter what was flying around me. I was swatting at it, right? So it could have been a gnat, and I was swinging, trying to get that thing away from it, okay? So what happened was generalization took place. Sound good? So the stimulus, if it had similar characteristics to the original stimulus, if it had wings, looked like an insect like wasp, right? I responded to it, okay? It didn't have to be the original stimulus. Okay? Discrimination is our last of our phenomenon. So how do you teach a dog to discriminate between musical notes? Can you teach a dog to discriminate between F sharp and middle C? Yes, you can. Okay? So what you do is you condition them to respond to middle C, all right, then play F sharp. Generalization will take place. Okay? They will respond to both, F sharp and middle C, but then thereafter, what you need to do is only reinforce, say, F sharp, if that's your goal, right? Don't reinforce middle C. You'll play both of them, but only reinforce F sharp. Sound good? Over the course of the next, say, 20 pairings, the dog's going to be able to differentiate F sharp from middle C. Sound good? They won't salivate to middle C. They will salivate to F sharp. Okay? So we do that. I mean, in many different ways, many different aspects of our life, we have the ability to discriminate and make decisions. There are certain situations when you know when to ask, mom and dad for $20, right? You can see the facial expressions, right? The mannerisms. There's times when you know not to ask for $20, okay? Because you can see the facial expressions. That's classical conditioning. That's discrimination, right? In that particular case, okay? It actually may be operant conditioning. Your reinforcement would be the $20. Okay? All right. So, some examples of the research behind Pavlov, going beyond Pavlov. So Watson comes along. I think I've told you about this before. He's all about emotional conditioning. So you make sure that you put emotional conditioning next to Watson. So you got Pavlovian, classical conditioning with Pavlov, and then we got emotional conditioning. So he takes the ideas of Pavlov and then expands upon them, and he plays around with emotions then. He's got little Albert, and he says, little Albert is brought in, and he's not afraid of rats, white rats in particular. And Watson says, I'll make him afraid of rats. So he puts a rat in front of little Albert and then takes a sheet metal and hammer behind little Albert's head. Little Albert's a little kid, and goes, bam, over and over and over. Rat, bam. All right, does that 20 times over. Of course, the loud noise for a little kid right behind his head, it's going to be unnerving. He's going to cry, right? Later on, all you have to do is put the rat in front of little Albert, and what does he do?
Right.
He starts to cry. He's been conditioned, all right, to fear rats because of that. Sound good? So, It is a little bit. What's worse is he didn't debrief little Albert, didn't recondition him, wasn't able to do that. So, and generalization took place. Did I not share this with you?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, generalization took place, and so he's now fearful of everything that is white, right? Because the rat was white there as well. Okay. There's another one. I don't think I told this one to you about Peter and the rabbits. No. Okay. So a co-worker of Watson took the idea. And there was this little boy named Peter, and he was deathly afraid of rabbits for some reason. For most part, I think of rabbits as being soft and non-aggressive, right? But evidently this kid was afraid of them. Must have met this rabbit, okay? So she wanted to recondition him, right, so that he could overcome this fear. So she would present the boy with rabbits, Peter with rabbits, or with a rabbit, and then she would pair it up with positive stimuli. Like candy. Here's a rabbit, here's candy. Here's a rabbit, here's your mom, right? Here's a rabbit, here's your friends, okay? Pair that stimuli up over and over and over again. Of course, over the course of a week or so, Peter gets over his fear of rabbits. Sound good? So, one last thing before we get Joel's comment. Really, all of our fears are really reflective of classical conditioning. Everybody got that? You may want to write that down. All of our fears are really reflective of classical conditioning. We've really had one bad experience, and then we become really fearful thereafter. The problem is, in order for extinction to take place, we have to have exposure to that fearful stimuli. And what do most of us do? We avoid it. We avoid it at all costs. So the fear is sustained. Joel, you got a question?
So, if you had something like that where, like, he was scared of rabbits and he was conditioned to not be scared of rabbits, would he eventually, could he eventually become scared of rabbits again?
Could have spontaneous recovery. Spontaneous recovery could take place. Yep. Not saying that it won't, or that it won't ever come back, but you could experience spontaneous recovery. Yep. All right. We're going to get to practice, okay? On the website, you're going to make a copy of this. Psychology Learning and Classical Conditioning Worksheet, third one down. Click on it. Go to File, make a copy of it. You've got all these examples here. And your task is to identify the 4 components of classical conditioning. The US, UR, CS, CR. You got to do those 4. And then if a phenomenon presents itself, you have to identify the phenomenon of the 4. Extinction, spontaneous recovery, generalization, and discrimination. Sound good? All right. You guys are good. Go ahead. Let's do the first one together. Everybody good?